How's everybody doing?
Appreciate that.
Cool.
First, I want to thank Mike for fixing the photo.
A little better looking photo. But yeah, so I think this is gonna be pretty chill conversation between two friends that happen to be black in Silicon Valley and trying to make waves. I think we'll just kind of talk about the story, and really I like to have it interactive, so we'll open it up and let some people ask some questions. I got a little surprise for those that do. That cool?
Awesome. So, Mike, dude, we originally met back in July 2014, man. It seems like a long time ago. It really wasn't. You've been quite busy since then, man. Tell me about it.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. So me and Kamar met, I have just moved to the Bay. But I think, like any kind of good story, there requires some context. So, just to let the crowd know. So I'm from Houston, Texas. Okay, there we go.
Houston.
Yeah, and it was crazy. Like now that I'm here, I kind of look back and I realized that some of the ways that I grew up, right, in the inner city of Houston, single parent, it was some situations that I had to deal with that I think have helped me even to what I'm doing now. And one of the things that, as he mentioned, my mom was very adamant about academics over athletics. I think we saw from an early age that I was a little talented in sports, but my mom was very adamant. She was like, look, you either have an A, a B, or an F, because if you come home with a C, you're gonna have the same ass whooping if you had a C or an F. And shout out to my mama, she's here in town for her birthday. But nonetheless, what I dealt with, growing up was kind of this, what I call this dual life, because we're in the inner city, right? And as a young black kid, you're kind of a product of your environment at times, right? Because you're only exposed to certain things. So, it was very crazy because I was kind of doing bad things that I probably shouldn't have been doing, just influenced in the neighborhood. But I was also like academically driven because my mom, she would hold me out from football games in third grade because I came home with a C. Missed the championship game, we lost. I don't want to get into it, but it was that type of foundation that allowed me to kind of tote that line. Where once I got to high school, I was a 4.0, 1200 SAT, president of the engineering club, but I was also the star linebacker, and I just happened to know how to tackle people. And so it was always weird having to be faced with this decision, on the weekends or, when school was out. Because in school, I was kind of looked at as like the great student, right? But they didn't know, my mama don't even know. We go out, at home, it was a bit of a different story. And so, being able to manage that at such a young age, I think kind of helped. And me knowing you personally, I know you probably had some of that as well.
No, definitely. I mean, I share a very similar background. Originally from Brooklyn, went to high school in Atlanta. Immigrant parents from Jamaica, and very on me about studying and bringing home the right grades. But heavily influenced with again my environment. Everyone around me looked at sports and entertainment as the only outlet to get out of the hood or get out of their current circumstance, right? And I got caught up in that pipe dream too, man. Except I didn't make it to the league. I like my man Mike. Tell me a little bit more about that transition after high school, going to Duke, and how did you end up coming to the Valley?
Yeah, so for me coming out of high school, again, because of my mom, I had high expectations about where I wanted to go to school. Initially, I was looking at football schools, but then when Duke University comes calling and you can go to Duke for free, I think you take that opportunity. So I remember.
It's a good choice.
Yeah, I remember being able to go to Duke on a full scholarship, and again, being one of the only black kids in most of my lectures. So dealing with that experience a little bit. There was this whole Duke lacrosse thing that happened my freshman year. So that was a bit crazy on campus in the community. But again, I always approach the classroom the same way I do on the field. And I was a 2-time All-American. I graduated early with a public policy degree. And from there, I was already preparing for law school because I knew that you're only one blown knee away from never playing again. And again, my mom was like kind of the thought process behind that. So from there, I was, studying for the LSAT, and, again, I thought I had a shot. And thankfully, I was able to sign to the Colts, and amazing experience playing on that level. But even in the midst of it, right, I was always kind of thinking about the future. One of the things that, one caveat, a lot of guys in NFL, they play video games a lot. I've never been a gamer, right? I only played NCAA because I was in the game, right? But once I got to the league, like, guys would spend hours just playing games. And I just, again, my intellectual, like, thirst was not being quenched. So I started, like, reading and just, again, trying to prepare for what would be after, because my career wasn't as long and as glorious as I had, dreamed of. Being a 5'11" middle linebacker in the NFL, a little tough. So once I was done, I kind of started to look for what that transition was. I didn't want to go the normal route of becoming a football coach or a fitness guy or whatever. I wanted something that really leveraged my passions, and business was something that kind of bubbled up while I was playing. A lot of guys threw ideas back and forth, and all I knew, as he mentioned, that you go get your MBA, take out a small business loan, and start some company. I didn't even know anything about the Bay, tech startups or whatever.
That's interesting, man, because I like to credit, like, my very early success. I mean, still very early, doing this startup grind thing, but it's early exposure to, like, technology. And fortunately, I kind of was blessed with a computer at the age of 9, and fell in love with that process and started programming at that age. And then I had huge aspirations to come to Silicon Valley. Thought Silicon Valley was its own state. Didn't know it was in California. Shout out to Tim Draper.
Six Callies.
But for me, it felt like a very organic fit after some, internal battles, and like with friends in high school, like, hey, let's go make the next, swag surfing song, or let's continue, playing basketball and that type of thing.
Which you actually produced Swag Surfing, the song, right?
I did.
You guys know that song, Swag Surf? Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. But during that time, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, all right, well, I could go into sports entertainment. I could take this, hopefully, I think my doctor at the time was saying I might hit 6 feet. So I was like, I can definitely make it to the league. But it really felt organic for me to end up in Silicon Valley at the end of the day, right? I was like, I already started doing this operating system and all this programming. Like, why not kind of go, this route where, even though there's no one that looks like me there, right? And largely falling in love with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and that story. How did you make that transition, not even knowing, like, that you can start a business outside of using a loan, right?
Right. I think it was very crazy. So I'll kind of sum it up. I had taken the GMAT. I was actually going to go back home to Houston, to Rice, and a friend of mine who was a comp sci major at Duke, playing in the league, building apps on the side, like, very bizarre, very unique. Me and him used to talk a lot. He'd say, Mike, I heard about this new program. I don't know anything about it. It's brand new. It's called Draper University. You should check it out. I think you might like it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll check it out. I had no intention to. He ended up sending me the link and made it much easier. So I clicked, I started reading. I was like, oh wow. Like, all I know is that Facebook's out there, and this is gonna sound bad, but I thought Silicon Valley, they made breasts, like silicone breast. Like, honestly, right? So I'm reading.
You never told me that part.
Bro, I'm from the South, went to school on the East Coast, had never even been to the Bay. So, like, again, it was just that ignorance. And so once I read through this program, I said, wow, this is interesting. And funny enough, the deadline passed. I applied anyway, and I was talking to a young lady named Carol, and I said, hey, I actually have to make a decision for Rice or what I'm gonna do business school wise. Maybe you can make it easier for me by telling me I didn't get in, because their decision was like a few weeks out. She's like, no problem, I'll call you tonight. Long story short, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, man, look, I don't know anybody in the Bay, right? Like, I'm gonna just go home, like, I'm gonna go where it's safe. My fiance, we were ready to, like, get our lives started, and this unknown thing was just too risky. Yep. So I ended up calling my boy. I said, look, man, thanks, but I'm not gonna do it. Like, when they call, even if I got in, I'm gonna just go to Houston where I know what's happening. And so I was like, yeah, Carol's gonna call and I'll let her know. He's like, yeah, I understand. So the phone rings, right? And I'm expecting Carol, it's Tim Draper. Yeah. Tim's like, hey, Mike, this is Tim. I just wanted to call and say you're in, full scholarship, we'll see you in March. And I was like, so my plan went out the window.
Definitely.
So I'm like, you can't tell Tim no. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll see you in March. And it was one of the best decisions, ever. And it's so funny because if Carol would have called, I probably wouldn't be on this stage, right?
Oh, man.
So,
you touch on, so I mean, I think once you made that second visit back out to the Bay after Draper, we met, and it was pretty interesting, right? Like, you had this very excitable, like illustrious plan on like how startups work, how they really do it, and instead of kind of like reading about it, you joined Keep, right?
Yeah. So kind of what happened, I came out of Draper, finished in the top group there, and we had 9 weeks, and I was wide-eyed, ready to take on Silicon Valley. And life happened. My wife and I, we had our first child. Shout out to my wife. And so we kind of took a year. I taught myself how to code, design. I just was like, I want to get prepared and make this move. And I was working on a little idea, not win-win. And so when I made the transition, I made a decision. Another good decision in my mind was I should work at a startup first so I can really kind of understand this thing from the ground up versus trying to build one off 9 weeks of a program.
Yeah.
So, I was able to work with Brian Wong at Keep, which was an amazing experience.
Brian's dope.
Yeah, and I was able to learn from this 22-year-old who had raised VC money at 18 and really watch how he was moving. And at that point in the company, I think it was Series B. And so, I was really able to kind of learn, grow a network, grow some knowledge. And September 2015, I'll never forget when I kind of had a little bit of a light bulb moment. And
yeah, man. I remember you gave me a call, and we've always been talking. And I think by that time, I think Flip was around for about a year, and we had just finished Y Combinator and everything like that. And you had this idea, and I was like, hey, you're like, well, I want to come work at Flip, and I'm like, dude, I think you should try this idea out. And now that's win-win. It's crazy, right? So like, tell me about like that aha moment and like what you've been doing or working on in the past, like what, 2 years?
Yeah, so we incorporated Win-Win 2016. So the short version is, as a former athlete, I was looking at these FanDuel and DraftKings commercials in a different way than most consumers, right? I was like, man, this is kind of annoying, right? They're making billions, but the athletes, they're not promoting it at all. And why is that, right? And this is another deeper theme around diversity and the type of problems that diverse founders go after, right? And so I said, let's build a platform that drives more value to the athletes and inevitably to the fans. And so what we do is we're a sports gaming platform that connects fans with their favorite athletes and influencers while raising money for charity. And
okay,
so,
wait. Before you kind of go on a tangent here, you're gonna have to show them what you mean. You're gonna have to show them what you mean.
So and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So basically we work with an athlete, right? They host a game tournament. It could be fantasy sports, it could be bracket challenge, whatever it is. You, like, let's say Steph Curry, right? And so you would pay money to join Steph's tournament. It could be 20, 15, 20, 30 bucks, whatever. That money goes to the Steph Curry Foundation. And now once you're in the tournament, you're competing, but you're not competing for money. You're competing for experiences that money can't buy, like courtside seats or meeting Steph after the game or whatever, right? So I'll just show, like, I think we got a couple examples. So these are a couple guys.
I'm John. I won the Week 3 contest for the Malcolm Jenkins. I'm here on the sidelines of the Philadelphia Eagles game, and I just gotta say thanks to Win-Win.
You look so excited. You can't believe it.
I won the Week 15 in the Major League Challenge. Go get one!
And I think collectively they paid like 30 bucks to get into the tournament as a donation. But this is one of my favorite ones. Our first week we did this one.
We
This one's
are
like a
at
minute and a
Phoenix Airport, about to pick up one of our winners from Patrick Peterson's Week 1 tournament.
I just landed in Phoenix. I don't think I'm gonna get any sleeping done because tomorrow I meet Pat and fly to the LSU Bama game, and I can't even describe the emotions that I'm having.
Three winners.
Look at this.
We got to talk to Pat, get to learn a little bit about what it's like to be an NFL player, what his LSU experience was.
Shout out to Northbound Films in here who shot all our
We're at
content.
Baton Rouge Airport, just flew in with Patrick Peterson. About to roll to the game. See you on the sideline.
We're going into the game, baby. I think we're going right on the field right now.
Win do it big, though.
What's going through my head right now? I mean, this is unreal. Being on the field, this big of a
these guys
game,
paid
we're about to get a
money,
win.
And it all went to the
You
Baton
in
Rouge
the
Area
Cathedral
Foundation
of
to support
Love.
flood victims
The
from the big flood
pantheon
in
of
Baton
concrete
Rouge.
and steel. When the sun sets in the western sky, it will be Saturday night in Death Valley.
They have full access. One of the biggest college games in the country.
I love this game. I wish I could shut up right now. It's war time. Let's stop that shit. Let's go.
So yeah, as a fan, you're now able to compete for these types of experiences while simultaneously donating to charity. Athletes raise awareness and funding for things they care about, boost their positive PR and marketability. And as a charity, you're now able to tap into an innovative way to sustainably raise funding in a way that, you know, allows you to reach non-traditional donors like millennials, right? So, you know, that's why we just called the company what it was, a win-win. And it's been an amazing, you know, about 12 months since I actually incorporated in January. In about 9 months, built the team, built the product, raised $1 million, and launched on time in September. And you know, coming from outside of Silicon Valley, I think, like some people would ask, like, man, how did you have the wherewithal to know that you were gonna incorporate and launch in 9 months, you know, from nothing? And you know, because I didn't have that statistic in my mind, like, oh, it takes 2 to 3 years. I was like, look, this is the goal, and this is how we just gonna get it. And but was able to bring on some amazing folks, you know, and it's been crazy. And here we are.
Yo, so I mean, you talked on a gambit of different things, right? There's two things I want to call out. Like, one of them is, do you think it's been a challenge for you being a double minority, both Black or African American and an athlete? Because you know, imagine I deal with a lot of investors or athletes, and sometimes they get that dumb jock kind of.
Yeah, that was something that I've always dealt with, and I've combated it, you know, with a fervor that, you know, I just don't like it, right? Because again, I just so happen to know how to tackle people. You know what I mean? Like, that was like the side note. You know what I mean? I was just gonna use that to keep it moving. But like coming out here, you know, it was a little tough. I'm not gonna lie, because once people find out that I played, then they kind of put me in this box. Not only am I Black, but you're now an athlete trying to start something. I had somebody tell me very early on when I had this idea coming out of Draper that I should try something else. They're like, statistically, Mike, like, we love you, but you know, these guys went, like, yeah, you went to Duke, but these guys went to MIT, Stanford, they worked at Google, like, you just statistically won't make it, and we want to see you do well, go do something else. And again, I was like, nah, bruh, and you know, went after it. But you know, even when dealing with, you know, VCs or investors or just folks in the Valley, like, that's definitely something that I've, you know, had to combat.
For sure. I mean, I think one of the things I admire about your story, you know, though we come from very similar backgrounds, we're obviously not the same person. I can't tackle people. But, you know, there's something I definitely admire, and, you know, you're not like me, right? You're not 20, you're in your 20s, you're not single. Shout out to Tinder. You know, how do you balance like having a wife and kids, man, like, and running a business? I think it's already tough. You know?
Oh yeah, it's extremely tough. And if I'm being frank, you know, that's one of the hardest parts, right? Because you know, I got like the most beautiful wife inside and out that, you know, we didn't know what this thing was gonna be like, right? We just jumped out there. She was with the mission. And you know, now we're in it, and like we, you know, there's things that we gotta be able to, you know, compromise on. Like I'm traveling, we got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. She works a full-time job. Like she's an animal, right? And so that's why this works. That's why I'm up here, because of her, and it's our 3-year anniversary today. So shout out to my wife. But it's definitely harder. But I think, you know, I use it, right, as a way to like push through, where I'm up 4 days in a row, because MJ gotta eat, you know what I mean? Like, so I use that and I funnel that you know, that situation to help drive it. And you know, again, it's hard, we're learning, but but it's doable. It's definitely doable.
Definitely.
But before we get into Q, I just remembered there's been this thing that I've been hearing about you, right? That I admire this guy, right? He was one of the guys that I've been kind of chasing, if you will, right? And one of the things that's been floating around is like this guy Kamar is like the black Bill Gates or the black Mark Zuckerberg almost, right? Like I'm talking, and like we flew over this, like basically came up with the iPad, right? As an intern, freshman intern, went to Google, Y Combinator, like this type of path. Like where did that come from? This black Mark Zuckerberg.
So I don't know who keeps saying this, but you're definitely another person who brought this to my attention. I think honestly, I won't have that claim of fame because, right now we're still a startup. We're still hungry. We're still, trying to achieve our goals, right?
Yeah.
Overall, I do like the theme of it, right? I like the theme of what is the Black Bill Gates, especially since Beyonce put it in her line, right? Like flawless. I love that song, by the way. I love that song. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, for me, I looked up to Bill Gates. I looked up to Steve Jobs. I looked up to these individuals, and sometimes I could see how it's hard for other people that come from the same background as us, being able to relate, which is why you might have missed this Silicon Valley thing, like with the Web 1.0 kind of happening. I mean, I got to see that from, the East Coast, but still aspire to be a part of it or influence in some way.
Right.
And, when we're talking about diversity in tech and how to like fix that, I think it's a pipeline issue, right? I think it's ultimately we need more individuals being inspired by shining examples. Barack Obama is definitely one of those.
Yep.
Right now, there are individuals that can say that I want to be the black president because they've seen one, right? And in this day and age, when you have Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and these individuals, a lot of tech, billionaires, but then even just people that have huge impacts in the world through their services and products that they provide. I think there should be somebody that represents minorities for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, growing up, I'm looking at Emmitt Smith, right, from the Cowboys, or I'm looking at like artists and entertainers. I used to freestyle a little bit. We could hit some bars later, but like that was kind of what I saw. And a lot of my friends, right? Like if I saw a black Mark Zuckerberg like yourself, or like aspiring to be that, it's like now I want to do that, right?
No, for sure. And I think it's a little bit of twang, right? I mean, like where I come from, I still love sneakers.
Right.
I still obsess about them. I still love culture and music and things like that. That influences my business on a day-to-day basis, right? It changes a lot of different things. And I think it's just like more relatable. So I think that's really why people might be saying this, like this just individuals that say, hey, I kind of want to be that guy.
Right.
Never thought I'd be in that position, but I'm glad that that's, starting to change the focus around.
Got the sauce. So we got a few minutes. Like I said, we definitely wanted to just open it up. I think we got a mic if anybody has questions or comments. Anybody? Got one in the back? Don't be shy. I got a surprise for those that ask questions.
You're always full of surprises, man.
It's a win-win.
Hey guys, thank you for your time and for speaking with us today. My name's Dan.
What's up, Dan?
I'm an entrepreneur here. We're in batch 19 of 500 startups.
Nice.
My question was, I definitely think that the lack of representation is an important issue on more of the agency side of the situation in terms of allowing people of color to see themselves in these spaces by seeing people who look like them in those spaces. But I also think that a large part of the lack of diversity in tech and the startup industry in general is more of a structural issue in terms of people of color, other minorities. I'm formerly low income, having access to startup capital, to mentors who help you develop your business model, a network of investors. Do you have any thoughts on how to address more of those structural issues that go beyond people just being able to see themselves in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I want to say that everything comes from an idea, right? Like a thought. First you have to see it and envision it, and then it turns into that. So many of the founders in this audience, a lot of their companies started from that, that aha moment or anything like that. Now, in terms of the structural stuff, there's plenty of programs like 500 Startups. Mike is currently going
Batch
through.
20.
And I mean, I've been through Y Combinator. I'm an alum of Y Combinator, and they're always looking for epic founders, right? And there's no cookie cutter thing. There's a long frequently asked questions list on the website that says, what does it really mean to apply and get in? I think a lot of people just don't know that they can just even apply. That's one of the things. But there's plenty of people that look like me, represent different backgrounds and ethnicities, and there's those real resources to like those things that you called out, like capital and mentorship, as well as just kind of a founder network. Very similar to Startup Grind, right? Like I feel the energy, all the ideas flowing, and excited charts that go up and to the right, right?
Right. And I think from my perspective, it's just about going and getting it. I talked to a lot of folks, because I very quickly became the tech guy to a lot of my friends, athletes, the same. And I'm like, you really, psychologically, you almost feel like you can't do it because you don't see anybody doing it, right? But I'm one of those advocates that are like, you just got to go get it. Like you be highly surprised, and I always say, like, very quickly you'll realize, like, I'm supposed to be here, right? Like I belong here and I can do well here. So that's kind of my take on it. I think we got time for one more.
Hi, just wanted to thank you again. My name is Schwan. This is my co-founder in Howitt, and we run a mentorship platform actually for women and minorities. So one of the questions I'm really curious about is how do we attract more mentors like you, and also how did you guys find mentors yourself to sort of help you get started and to pass on the knowledge and to close the gap?
I think for me it's an easy question. You just got to ask.
For us.
Right, yes, I will. I'm very passionate about like passing that knowledge, and I think as minorities and folks that don't have as much access, right? I think we feel a responsibility that we do need to give back, right? And so I think as long as you can ask, it shouldn't be a problem, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and just kind of like piggyback on that, I think it's just perspective, right? More diverse teams. I think there's an overall theme here that's just kind of like shedding more light. I love what your company does, a great one-liner. I'm more than willing to help out in any way that I can, and anyone in my network as well. I think some of the things that I've done personally is just, again, like cold calling. Like this guy is a perfect example of brute force.
Literally.
Literally, there was times where I didn't have time for a meeting with, and he would hit me up, show up at my doorstep, like those type of things. I'm not saying, to kind of like go and harass individuals. That's not what I'm advocating. But what I'm saying is there's a difference in how you approach things, and people see that, right? I think, majority of what we communicate is nonverbal. And that extends to emails and everything else, right? It's the passion, the energy.
So I think that's our time. I gotta get my followers up. So if y'all would all follow me real quick on Twitter, I just started a new account. But you can reach us both out. Like I said, we're both very open to, just chopping it up in general,
collaborating,
answering questions, collaborating. I think that's what it's all about. We want to make win-win situations all around.
At the end of the day, it's all about the startup grind, right?
Thank you.